Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this evening's IMA Durban branch webinar on the rise of the machines. But before we start with the formal proceedings of the program, as it is customary with many of our IMA, if not all our programs, we start with the verses of the Holy Quran. And I'll ask Dr. Ibrahim Khan to do the opening qiraat. And thereafter, he will just do a short welcome. Thereafter, I'll introduce the speaker, and then we'll go straight through to Bilal Kathrada. Before we start with the qiraat, I would kindly request everyone to disable your audio and your video. It just gives a greater bandwidth. And inshallah, we've got about 38 participants at the moment, and we're ready to start. Over to Dr. Ibrahim Khan.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen. Wassalatu wassalamu alayka ya rasuluhun nabiyil kareem. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the most beneficent and the most merciful. And abundant of praises be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In commencing with the recitation of the Holy Quran and keeping with tonight's topic, I have selected this verse in chapter 23. The verses is from 12 to 14. And inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to begin the recitation. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِّنْ طِينٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً فِي قَرَارٍ مَّكِينٍ ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran that man will create from of clay. Then we placed him, then we developed out with another creature, so as to be Allah, the best to create. Now the reason I selected this verse is that this Quran was revealed more than 1,400 years ago to our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a embryonic creation inside a human body, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that out of a drop of sperm in a place of rest, that is the womb, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firmly fixed it until it became into a clot of congealed blood. Now we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the development of the fetus, and this was revealed in the Quran more than 1,400 years ago. But much later now in the modern world, we have been able to develop machinery, we have able to develop equipment that enables us, I'm referring to the ultrasound and other machines that we use nowadays to look at the fetus inside the mother's womb. And up to that time, up to the time when we had discovered these machines, beyond that we had no knowledge about how it was that a baby was formed in the mother's womb. And we have been tracing that, and we've been following that with our machines until we come to the conclusion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already described this entire process in the Quran Sharif. It is a great lesson for us that we need to learn from this, that we may rely on machines as much as possible, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the keeper of all knowledge, and that he has revealed this knowledge for our benefit in the Holy Quran, which we have now discovered with the creation of machinery. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome back. I'm your program coordinator for this evening. My name is Shakira Kassam, and the person behind the screen who is actually the master, the mistress of the evening is Dr. Femida Sheikh, who is hosting it on her Zoom platform. Now, we hosted a very successful Zoom platform meeting a few weeks ago when we launched the IMA Oxygenator home-based oxygen program. Before we get to Bilal Kathrada and the main focus for this evening, I'll just go back to Dr. Ibrahim Khan, the chairman of the Durban branch, just to give us a little bit of feedback about the program of the home oxygenator program, how it's running, just about 2 to 3 sentences.
Alhamdulillah, it gives me great pleasure to welcome one and all of you again to this webinar, this platform which has been created by the Islamic Medical Association. As chairperson of the Durban branch, I'd like to officially welcome one and all of you. What Shakira is referring to is the one webinar we held on the 6th of August, which was addressed by Dr. Farida Ahmad, as well as our Shamim Khan, who's the physiotherapist, and Dr. Suleiman from Ahmad Al-Qadi Hospital, when they spoke about home management in terms of the coronavirus. So at that particular webinar, we did officially launch the oxygenator concentration machine. And alhamdulillah, it gives me great pleasure to inform one and all of you that the program has been very successful. We have sufficient number of machines. We've been able to get a lot of donors to contribute towards it. And alhamdulillah, we have certain formalities which people are completing, and a number of machines have already gone out, and we are proud as the Islamic Medical Association that we have been able to be of use and benefit to the community at large without any discrimination. We have been able to lend out this machine to various people who require oxygen, not only for the sake of the COVID, but for any other purpose as well. Jazakallah, assalamu alaikum.
Well, we're just going to start our program with a brief introduction of Bilal Kathrada, our main speaker for this evening. As many of you might have been aware that this year was the 40th IMA annual convention, and we were going to host it in Durban in August. And our theme for this year was the fourth industrial revolution and climate change, two very relevant topics. And who knew that we would be overtaken by the COVID pandemic? And who knew that we would have to move so fast towards the fourth industrial revolution? And I had earmarked Bilal Kathrada to be one of our speakers for the IMA convention, but alas, we couldn't do the convention. Well, not yet. We perhaps looking at a convention in the virtual field. Watch the space. Now, Bilal Kathrada, I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with him, or might have seen him in the newspapers, or watched him on television, heard him on the radio. He's an educational technologist, technology entrepreneur, and the founder of the IT Varsity. Now, I had a sneak preview of his slide, and whatever I was going to introduce him as, I saw he's got a slide on it. So I'll very briefly speak about him and introduce him, by no means doing absolute justice to the dynamite, the wealth of knowledge that he has. He's a software engineer by profession, but he's also very happily and willingly and unselfishly transfers this information and wants to transform people's life using technology as a means of education enhancement. He's an award-winning app developer, and he was featured in a book by Gerard Villingen, and he was called Developer and Advocate for his work in promoting software development as a career in South Africa. He's written columns for many of the daily newspapers, locally and nationally. And as I've mentioned, he's appeared on SABC3 and SAFM. And also just watch his podcast, look out for that, which is entitled Tech Watch, which covers the latest development in technology and the social implications. And this is available on a number of local as well as international platforms. Okay, over to you, Bilal Kathrada, and we're so happy to have you with us this evening. Bilal will speak for about 45 minutes. We'll have a few minutes for questions and answers. And we've got some very exciting new programs or little things lined up. So just please listen, and we hope that you sit back and relax. Over to you, Bilal.
Thank you, Dr. Kassam. Jazakallah. It's quite an honor to be speaking to you esteemed members of the medical fraternity. Actually, I'm looking at the list of attendees and there's so many familiar names here. It's such big names. I'm really honored and I'm humbled to be speaking here. So today I want to focus on the topic of technology as it affects the medical field. This is in keeping with what is my passion. One of my passions is to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world of technology, and more importantly, to understand how this is going to change our lives and how we can prepare for such a time when technology...
What happened?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Bilal, we can hear you. You can go in. You can share your screen.
Okay, I will share my screen now.
We can hear you clearly.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen right now. So as I was saying, my passion is not just technology itself, but how we can prepare for technology. I mean, pretty much every field is being affected by technology, by this meteoric change that's taking place, the disruption that's taking place in the world of technology. So I think, you know, the fields that were traditionally not so much affected by technology, things like agriculture. When I speak about technology, I mean specifically information technology. When you look at agriculture, it wasn't so much affected by information technology, but now even agriculture, even fields that were not traditionally very much affected by technology are now becoming affected, just like the medical field. So my passion is to try and foresee what this disruption is going to look like and how we can prepare for it. So as Dr. Kasim introduced me earlier on, I run IT Varsity. Now, IT Varsity is my passion. It's my business, but it's also my passion to empower South African youth. You know well that, you know, South Africa has one of the highest rates of youth unemployment in the world, and it's alarming the widening gap between the rich and poor, the wealth inequality gap. So my mission in life is to try and bridge that gap by teaching our youth relevant technology skills so that they can become part of the global IT services sector, just like India and Singapore and Finland and so many other countries have jumped aboard, and they are thriving. They have thriving economies thanks to information technology. So my mission in life is to try and get our youth into that. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of fun. I'm going to introduce my topic within the context of 3 science fiction movies. Now, you may be wondering, why science fiction? The answer is very simple. The answer is this, that what was considered science fiction, what was firmly within the realm of science fiction just a few decades ago, is now becoming science reality. Now, if you look at the 3 panels on the screen right now, on the left we have Doc McCoy, who was the Starship Doctor in the 1960s series Star Trek. The middle panel is from the movie Matrix, and the right panel is from the movie Star Wars. Now, I'm going to talk about these, but before that, I want to set the tone. I want to give you the backdrop to what I'm about to tell you, specifically with regard to the medical fraternity. We are living right now in an age of disruption. What does this mean? How does this disruption manifest itself? What does it mean and how does it manifest itself? Well, let me give you 3 facts that will show you to what extent our world is being disrupted. Fact number 1, did you know the top 10 in-demand jobs this year globally did not exist 10 years ago? So we are now looking for people to do work that didn't exist 10 years ago. There wasn't even a job description for those kinds of jobs. Now, here's some of the jobs that companies are looking for that most of these did not exist just a decade ago. Machine learning engineer, for example. A machine learning engineer is a person that teaches an artificially intelligent system how to recognize certain aspects of its work, or how to recognize the world around it, how to recognize pictures, etc. Advanced analytics. We know that companies like Facebook and Instagram are generating tons of data on a daily basis. Now they need people who will be able to analyze this data that's coming in. Now these jobs, as you can see, are quite new. They didn't simply exist 10 years ago. Fact number 2, according to scientists, half of today's jobs will not exist in 10 years' time. So 50% of today's jobs, of the jobs that people are doing today, will not exist in 10 years' time. Now, this may sound alarming, but my intention is not to alarm anyone. My intention is just to show the level of disruption. Now, let me give you an example, right? Around 20 to 25 years ago, if you needed to watch a movie, how would you do it? You needed a VCR player, you needed one of those big clunky video cassettes, you'd put the cassette in, rewind it and play. This was a multi-billion-dollar industry that employed millions of people across the entire supply chain, from manufacturing through distribution, through service and repairs of the machines, the cassettes, you name it. There were millions of people employed in that industry. Today, where does that industry exist? It's completely disappeared off the face of the earth. In fact, I can't even remember when was the last time I saw a VCR player. I don't know if you can remember when was the last time you saw one of those old gadgets. But what happened? That entire industry disappeared and people moved on to other jobs. So from VCRs, we went to CDs and then DVDs and then Blu-ray. And now pretty much everybody watches their movies through streaming services like Netflix. So this is the nature of technology. It brings in new trends. It brings in brand new innovations, and it makes old markets and old innovations and old jobs obsolete, and people move on to other jobs. So half of the jobs today, according to scientists, will not exist in a decade's time. Now, fact number 3, did you know? Now, this is the most surprising, and this sounds like a tall order, right? This sounds like a bit of a stretch. We are going to see more tech innovation in the next decade than we saw in the previous century. How is that even possible? Because the past century, we're talking about 100 years versus just 10 years. How is that even possible? Because this hasn't been an ordinary 100 years. This has been the 100 years where computers and the internet and phones and mobile and everything that we know has been discovered. How can 10 years match that or even or beat that? So it sounds like a lot, but I'm going to explain to you how. How is this going to be possible? Well, it's going to be possible through innovation. The fast pace of innovation is what is driving these new trends, is driving this disruption. Now, at the forefront of this innovation is a new phenomenon, or a fairly new phenomenon that's taking over our world. Now, bear this in mind. For the past 100 years, all the tech innovation that took place was driven by human beings. But for the next 10 years, the tech innovation is not going to be driven by human beings, or is not only going to be driven by human beings. We have help. And let me give you an example. The guy you're seeing on the screen right now is Lee Sedol. Lee Sedol is the world champion Go player. He's the best Go player in known history. Now, Go is a game. You can see on the screen, there's a little board there with some beads. Go is a game that has black and white beads, and it's played on a grid, not too different from checkers or chess. You know, the board is not too different. The game itself is completely different. Now, Go is one of those games. I don't want to go into too much details about it. It's a game that requires a lot of intuition. The basic rules of the game are very simple. It's extremely simple. But actually playing the game and winning the game requires creativity. It requires intuition. It requires a lot of experience. Now, for the past few decades, we saw computer games or we saw advanced computers that could play chess, that could play checkers, but we never saw a computer that could play the game Go. And the reason for this is because whereas the game of chess, for example, has a finite number of moves. So with every move that the human makes, the computer computes, it calculates the number, every possible move that it can make, and every counter move that the human can make till the end of the game. So because there's a finite number of moves, it was fairly simple for computer programmers to program in all those moves into the computer. A game of Go, on the other hand, has more possible moves than the total number of atoms in the known universe. That's the number that's given to us, the phenomenal number that's given to us. As a result, it was impossible for computer programmers to actually program the legal moves into a game of Go. So what did they do? Basically nothing. They did nothing over the past few decades. However, around 4 or 5 years ago, some engineers at Google decided to give it a shot, but using a completely different approach. What they did was they designed a computer. That computer's name is AlphaGo. And this computer was programmed with artificial intelligence algorithms. Basically, it was a self-learning computer. It is a self-learning computer. And what they did was they taught it the basic rules of the game Go, and they showed it tens of thousands of games of Go being played. And this computer, now knowing the rules and watching the games, it started to teach itself. It started to develop skills in the game Go. And then what it did was it kind of split itself into two personalities, almost into two players, and it started to play against itself. So 24 hours a day, day and night, day after day, week after week, it started to play itself, and it continued to play, and it became better and better and better at the game. Until such a point came, the designers decided, let's do some human testing. So the first round of human testing was very successful in a sense that the computer beat the humans. But then they got a bit ambitious. They said, all right, let's bring in the European Go champion. And they brought him in, and the computer beat him. It wiped him out. So they said, well, it's time to go for the world champion. And that's why they brought this gentleman in, Lee Sedol. And they said, well, you need to face up against this machine. And this is the game now. This is a picture of the actual game being played between Lee and this computer, AlphaGo. It was a grueling game. The computer beat Lee Sedol, long story short, 4 games to 1, and became the world Go champion. So for the first time in history, the championship of the game Go went from human beings to machines. Now, what was remarkable, what was truly remarkable about this was, for the first time in history, a computer proved 2 things. One is that it can learn a game just by observing. And secondly, that it could use intuition, that it could employ intuition in defeating a human being. And this guy, Lee Sedol, summed it up very nicely. He said, it's as though it was learning my every move, my every tactic, my every strategy, and it was using it against me. And so the computer won in that way. So this was a momentous step in the history of computing. And it was a next stage in the development of artificial intelligence. Now, you remember I told you that the next decade is going to see, we're going to see more tech advancements than in the previous century. Now, it will start to make sense to you. The technological advancements of the next decade are going to be driven primarily by artificial intelligence. Yes, we are going to play a role, but now we have, to help us, artificial intelligence. And you know, artificial intelligence just does things much faster than we can. People call this phenomenon Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution, which is driven primarily by two phenomena, AI and cyber-physical systems. Now, cyber-physical systems are systems that live in the real world, that are aware of their surroundings. Take, for example, self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are cyber-physical systems. They are nothing more than computers that have sensors that allow them to be aware of the world around them. So as they drive along our roads, as they drive along the highways, they are aware of traffic, of human beings, of obstacles, of animals, of where the road lies. So these are cyber-physical systems. So the fourth industrial revolution is actually defined by AI and these cyber-physical computers. I like to simply call it rise of the machines. And you know, where there's a fourth industrial revolution, there was the first, second, and third. The first was the invention of steam power. The second was towards the early part of the 20th century, when we saw mass production, assembly lines, and of course, electricity. The third industrial revolution, which hasn't ended yet, we're still in the third industrial revolution, is the age of computers and automation, which kicked in around about the mid-1970s, and it's continuing up until today. But now there's the fourth industrial revolution that's moving forward concurrently with the third industrial revolution. So we're basically living through two industrial revolutions right now. And as you can see, it's characterized by cyber-physical systems, networks, and of course, artificial intelligence. This beautiful, beautiful machine that we are seeing is a good example of a cyber-physical system. This is the Tesla Model S, which is not going to come to South Africa anytime soon, but it is remarkable in so many ways, in the sense that it's a battery-powered car, but more so that it is a self-driving vehicle. All right, so much about artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution. Now the stage is set for what is to come, which is, how is all of this affecting the medical field? Because that's obviously what we are here for. Now let's revisit our three friends here. Dr. McCoy, Neo from The Matrix, and of course Anakin Skywalker from the Star Wars series. Now the device that Dr. McCoy is holding, the guy on the left is holding, is known as a medical tricorder in the science fiction world. It's a device that the ship's doctor would use to scan a person's body head to toe, and it will give him a complete diagnostic on a tablet-like device that he holds in his hand. Now remember, this was in the 1960s. There wasn't even such a thing as a tablet device, let alone some kind of gadget that can scan a human body and give a complete diagnostic. So that's the first thing. As far as the movie Matrix goes, the whole crux of the movie revolves around humans plugging themselves into a computer, and the bulk of the movie actually takes place inside the computer. So they would plug themselves at the back of the head. There's a socket at the back of people's heads where they would plug in a specially designed plug, just like we get the USB plugs. They would plug themselves in, and rather than seeing the computer as a two-dimensional object in front of them, they would be immersed into the computer world, and everything they see and feel around them would be inside of that computer world. And in the Star Wars series, the one on the right, there's one thing. I mean, there's a lot of science fiction going on, but the one thing that stood out for me was that whenever any of the characters would get injured, you'd see them in the medical bay, and there was these robots that were operating on them that, were kind of fixing them up. Now, this used to be science fiction, but now all of these are becoming science reality. Let's start with the medical tricorder. Now, there's a device called the MedWard, which is in development right now, that will be able to scan a person and give a complete diagnostic. Now, how nice if this device was ready for the COVID pandemic. But in the future, we're going to get this device. So it could be held. It could be something used for the home, where if a child is sick, the mom would scan the child, get a full diagnostic, and then push a button, send the diagnostic to a pharmacy, which would be a robot pharmacy. This is a picture of the robot pharmacy that's in UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. So she would send that diagnostic to this pharmacy, which would pick out the medication, which would dispense the medication, and then deliver it via a drone. How amazing is that? And within a few minutes, ding dong, the doorbell will ring and the drone would deliver the medication. So this device, this medical tricorder, real world medical tricorder device, should be on shelves within the next couple of years. Now, the one application for it is obviously for home use, but there could be other applications for it. For example, you as medical professionals could send this device to a patient's home and scan it, and that device will send the diagnostics to you. So you don't have to be present. You could do diagnostics from anywhere in the world. And this would be really, really useful in a scenario like COVID. You would be safe from having to go out and face your patients and potentially exposing yourself. So that's the first thing. Now let's go to the matrix. This device, this is what our ex-South African friend Elon Musk is currently developing. It made big news recently. This is the Neuralink device. Now, the Neuralink device is basically a brain implant that will, as Mr. Elon Musk explains, it's an implant that will become so efficient and so easy to implant into a person that you could go to a doctor and within an hour, just like a filling, you would be able to implant that into your mind. Now, what's amazing about this is that it will give humans the ability to interact with devices just by thinking. So you would be able to control your phone or your vehicle or your computer just by thinking about what you want. Now, what's unique about Neuralink, although it's in very early stages of development, but for those that were in touch with what's happening in the news recently, Elon Musk did a demo on stage of the Neuralink device implanted in some pigs, and it actually picked up the impulses from the pig's brain and displayed that onto a screen. So as the technology advances, it will soon become, or testing will move to human beings. Now, what makes the Neuralink stand out from other similar devices? I mean, brain implants have been around since, the late 80s, early 90s. There have been numerous attempts to put in brain implants. Now, this one has electrodes that are 8 microns thick, and those are embedded into the brain. And because they are so thin, they don't interfere with the brain tissue itself. It's so thin that it actually slips between the brain cells, the neurons, and the blood vessels inside the brain. And it sits there and waits for brain impulses, and then it translates those impulses into a computer. But according to the designers, there's going to be a lot more uses for it than just controlling computers. I mean, they hope that in time people will be able to download information onto their brains just using a USB. So you'll be able to learn a new language or a new skill. But this is way, way, way in the future. We're looking at least decades before that technology reaches that stage. So that was the matrix. So in time, we'll be able to plug ourselves into our computers and live in the world as if it's a 3-dimensional space. Then we go to the Star Wars, and it brings us to Da Vinci. Those of you that are surgeons here have probably come across Da Vinci, which is basically a robot assistant that surgeons can use to do very delicate surgery. And as you can see in the picture, the surgeon sees what is going on via the screen, and he controls the Da Vinci robot. Remember, the robot itself doesn't do the operation. The surgeon is still doing the operation, except that his hands or her hands are replaced by the hands of the robot. So he can do very complex surgery with minimal cuts or minimal invasions into the patient's body, and in a fraction of the time. Now, what's great about this is that as much as the surgeon is sitting in the room in this picture, a time will come when the patient will be remote. The surgeon could be in any part of the world and use the exact same technology over a high-speed internet line and do the exact same surgery from anywhere in the world. And this is really crazy when you think about how amazing this would be. I mean, people that are in remote outlying areas, in areas where they don't have the expertise like we have here in South Africa, in Durban and in Johannesburg, the expertise that are probably here present in this webinar right now. You could operate on a person in some of the most remote parts of the world through an internet connection using the Da Vinci system. Now, this is going to evolve to the next level, which is that the robots will be able to do certain amount of surgery on their own without the surgeon. Maybe the surgeon will be there to supervise, to watch over what's going on, but a lot of the work will be done by the robots. Again, we're on our way there, but this is going to take place over the next few decades because artificial intelligence is not quite there yet. Now, these are just 3 examples that I've brought. I mean, there are so many other examples, but due to the brevity of time, I think I'm almost out of time here. There wasn't time to get into so much more. I'd like to explain these in more detail, but unfortunately there isn't time. Now, I hope I haven't scared anybody here. This is just the fact of life. This is the way technology is advancing. The question arises then, is there going to be a place for human beings? That's a question that I'm asked quite frequently in my talks and in sessions that I have. And I don't think this is a good question for the simple reason that, there's always going to be a place for human beings. Human beings deal with human beings. In the future, as much as we are heading towards a technologically advanced, a technologically driven world, remember there's always going to be place for human beings. And it's something I say to teachers also, that as much as we're going towards e-learning, there's always going to be place for the teacher in the classroom. It's the same with the medical fraternity. But the way we should look at this, rather than feel threatened by it, we should think about what opportunities it presents to us. Now, the opportunities are going to be boundless, but we need to prepare ourselves. And how do we do this? Now, this is my prescription to you. You guys are used to giving the prescriptions, but now I'm going to give you a prescription. These are the 6 steps to ensure that you will be successful in a technology-driven world. Firstly, mental elasticity. We need to have mental elasticity in the sense that we are open to new ideas. We are open to change taking place around us. Next, we go into creativity. Creativity is going to be a very in-demand skill going forward, even in the medical space. I mean, we think of creativity generally as, in art and design and things, but it's not that. It's in the way that we approach problems, which brings us to the next part, which is problem-solving skills, and then people skills. Because as much as, experts tell us, as much as we're going into a technology-driven world, people want more human interaction than ever before. And that's going to continue because that's what people want. We as human beings, by nature, when we go into a doctor's surgery, when I go into a doctor's surgery in the next few decades, I don't want to see a robot there. I want to see my doctor there. And yes, the robot will be an assistant, but at least I will be seeing a human being there. And obviously, critical thinking, the ability to look around us and see problems. And I'll give you an example now and I'll finish off. The ability to see problems and critically analyze those and look for opportunities in there. And finally, technology skills. There's no getting away from the fact that we all need technology skills. So I say this to teachers, and I say this to farmers, and I say this to you, to doctors, that you are going to be in the future a person with two professions. You're going to be a technology person alongside your current profession. So you're going to be a heart specialist, but a technologist also. You're going to be a farmer, but a technologist also. It's becoming so important. It's going to be integrated into pretty much every field. Now, here's a quick example, and I will conclude. This is, you probably already recognized it, right? It's an MRI scanner. Now, there's an interesting story behind this MRI scanner. When Doug Dietz from General Electric first designed this, it was a marvel of engineering. And, you know, he was really rightly proud of it. And it was set to win some major international awards. But one day, Doug went to a children's hospital and he found a huge problem with this MRI scanner. Not in the way it functioned. It functioned perfectly as expected. But the problem with it was that the very patients that were supposed to be using this were terrified of it. So he noticed at the hospital that he visited that before the child could go into the scanner, the nurse had asked for an anesthetist. So Doug says, well, you don't need anesthesia to use an MRI scanner. Why are you calling for an anesthetist? So the nurse said it is just to knock the child out because they are so terrified of this machine. They get claustrophobic in there and it becomes impossible to manage them. The moment Doug heard this, he realized that something was wrong with the overall design of his MRI scanner. The very people that were supposed to use it were terrified of it. So they went back and they redesigned these machines to look like what you are seeing on the screen now, to be thematic, to have a theme of either a pirate ship or a castle, something that's child-friendly. And not only that, but they also designed a narrative around it that the nurse would describe. So if it's a pirate ship scenario, the nurse would say, welcome aboard. You're going to go into a pirate ship and you're going to hear all these noises, but don't worry, that's the sounds of the anchor coming up and the ship creaking and hitting the water, etc. And they put this out. They transformed the machines to be more human-centric, and they put it out. Doug says, in his own words, he says, a few months later, I visited the same hospital, and I knew we had succeeded when I heard a child saying to her parent, after using the MRI, Dad, can we please come back tomorrow to use this machine? So they transformed the experience for the child. How? People skills. It wasn't the technology, it was the people skill that made all of the difference. Very quickly, these are some of the new fields that are in vogue or are going to be in vogue over the next decade. As you can see, number 9, bioengineering. I would like to talk about this, at some stage. It both fascinates me and scares me, this field of bioengineering, and I'd like to speak about it at some stage, but I'm unfortunately out of time. And finally, number 14, healthcare. Healthcare professionals, you guys are going nowhere. If anything, the human side of healthcare is going to be a lot more in demand going forward. And with those few words, I thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to attend, to listen to me, and allowing me to share my thoughts. I'm grateful to Dr. Kassem for giving me this opportunity. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, ask them in the chat. I have a survey that I'd like you to take part in, to give me some feedback, to let me know what you think about this presentation. And also, this is a request. I had a discussion with Dr. Kassem around more sessions like this, but more focused on learning specific technologies. If there's something that you'd like to learn about, please put it there in the survey. There is a question there. I will send you the link right now. And I'd like your input so that when we do design the training sessions, I will be in the loop. I'll know exactly what to focus on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I will take your questions if any.
Thank you so much, Bilal. Are you able to see the questions on the chat?
I can see the questions. I'll go through them one by one. So Zahir has a question. What about the ulama developing the fiqh for these situations? Let me tell you something. The ulama have to really play catch up, because I mean, think of scenarios. I mean, I spoke about bioengineering earlier on, where there'll be growing limbs in labs and fitting those limbs onto people, or it's already been done where they've grown meat in labs, they've grown burgers in labs. Is this halal? I don't know. It's something that the ulama have to get together and decide. Next question. What's your view on Boston, Massachusetts AI program advertised on YouTube? Is it a good cause? I think Boston, the MIT guys, you got this institute that's putting out all these robots. If you see Terminator 2, I think some of these robots just remind me of what's going on there. Look, they're doing some excellent work. They're doing some groundbreaking work. Boston Dynamics, that's what they're called. And I'm waiting to see what goes on there. I'm really looking forward to that. Some of the latest work they're doing is with nanobots. Robots on a nanoscale, which are going to be extremely useful in the medical space. So let's wait and see. Very thought-provoking content. What opportunities are there for policy making with regards to future IT? Plenty opportunities. Just like the ulama, the lawmakers are going to need to catch up or play catch up with the policies. I mean, think of something as simple as self-driving cars. Okay, not simple, but something that's already out there. Who drives a self-driving car? Can a parent put a child inside the self-driving car and say to the car, well, drive from point A to point B? What's the rule for that? Do you need a licensed driver present? I don't know. These are things that policymakers will really need to catch up on. Next question from Aslam. Has AI been implemented in trying to find cures for the COVID pandemic? Yes. Unfortunately, okay, there's a good side and a bad side. When the COVID pandemic hit, around about March, April, there were very encouraging reports coming out that scientists were running the research and the simulations for possible COVID cures through very powerful AI systems that were owned by Google and other companies. Nothing much came out of that, unfortunately. I think, COVID has just proved to be a challenge for everybody, including AI. But yes, at present and in the future, I actually wrote an article last year about IBM. It's called IBM 5 in 5, 5 new technologies that are going to emerge in the next 5 years, and that's where this whole concept of the scanners come out, where devices will be able to detect different types of bacteria on food or on surfaces or in our bodies using AI. So that's going to be fascinating. Would have been useful in integrating the vast amount of data around the world in the context of the short time frames we have to find a cure. Absolutely. And IBM is putting together this database of different virus and bacteria. Moving on, Dr. Mita has a statement. Would like to hear more focused AI use in medicine and value of telemedicine. Dr. Mita, I will share some of my articles with Dr. Kasim, and she'll share it with you guys. I go into a lot more detail about these topics, especially AI in medicine. It's going to be phenomenal. It's really going to make your lives much, much easier. Let's have more focused topics, inshallah. We have whet our appetite. I really appreciate that, Yaqub. Dr. Nasreen, thought-provoking. Prashni, would be excellent if you could address UKZN Medical School on this topic. Give me an invite. I'll be there. I'll bring my own lunch. How's that? It'll be.
Bilal, remember that idea came from me first. Eh?
Okay. Okay. It'll be an honor. I do a lot of work with UKZN, and I actually lecture at the IT department every now and again. So yeah, just let me know. I will be there. Yeah, that's all the questions that we have. Dr. Kasim, shall I hand back to you?
Yes, thank you. It's been a fascinating, and you didn't let me down, Bilal. Absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm glad there's still place for us as human beings. So that's the good thing. And it's what if you've shared has been amazing, mind-boggling. But the reason why I decided to have you and introduce you to the rest of our membership is that we have a lot of skill amongst us as medical professionals. And we also have this huge digital divide where, in terms of digital literacy, a lot of the people who have a lot of experience don't have that ability to move on to transfer it technologically. And that's where you come in. And we were thinking of having a series of digital literacy where you could perhaps train us. And I'd encourage all of you guys to go onto that link to fill in the survey that Bilal has put out for us. And maybe going forward from that survey, we look at more specific topics and how we could sort of enrich our membership and teach new skills to people, and how we could also embrace this educational technological field, the fourth industrial revolution, and move forward not only in our own practice, but also to enhance and spread learning. Because now with this virtual world, it's absolutely amazing. There's no bounds and no barriers to knowledge. You can seek knowledge from here, go right up to China, America, etc. So the barriers have all been removed. We've come to the conclusion of our program. And while we doing the conclusion, I'll ask Femida just to leave the thing on a little while longer so everyone can fill in the survey. We almost going towards, I think, 5 to 9, and we've been very good on our setup target to end at about 9 p.m. We may just run a few minutes longer. I'm going to hand over back to Dr. Ibrahim Khan. Now, we know with the COVID pandemic, we have lost a lot of medical professionals, a lot of other relatives, etc. And we want to make dua maghfirah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them, give them a highest abode in Jannah. And we also want to make dua shifa. And I'll hand over to Dr. Khan, who will do that. But before he does that, he will do a small vote of thanks.
Shukar Shakira, I think it was a wonderful program. And I think we must thank Bilal for having given us a mind-blowing presentation. I think it is set a ball in motion in terms of what the future is going to hold for us as medical practitioners as well. But I think not to fear, because many doctors might think that, you know what, now I'll have to become a technological expert as well as a medical doctor. But as we know that with ultrasound and with echo nowadays, we have a lot of technologists. And as he mentioned, there are jobs that will be created that may not existed before. So there may be people who will be able to help us in our practice of medicine in terms of becoming technologists in managing these machines. So inshallah ta'ala. So thank you so much, Bilal, our guest speaker for tonight, for having given us such a brilliant presentation and also opening our minds up to many possibilities that might exist in the future. Also to Dr. Femida Sheikh, thank you for managing this program. You are at the moment, I don't know where, but at the beginning of this technical expertise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for your help. And also to Dr. Shakira Kasim for having arranged this. And I think that it was something necessary as an introduction for us to know that, you know what, in the future, our lives may not be the same in terms of management. I thank all those who assisted in any which way in terms of making this program a success. And I want to thank all those who attended. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with the knowledge that you have gained today. With the concluding dua, inshallah ta'ala, let us raise our hands and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ببركة إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وأصحابه وأزواجه وبارك وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسوله النبي الكريم. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وسكنهم في الجنة. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وادخلهم في الجنة. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وروهم في الجنة. اللهم اجعل قبرهم روضة من رياض الجنة ولا تجعل قبرهم مفرة من حفر النيران فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم. या अल्लाह या गफूर रहीम इन्नल्लाह अला कुल्ली शैइन कदीर। तुम्हारे प्यारे नबी मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के सदक़े में या अल्लाह तमाम मुसलमान जो इंतकाल पा गए या अल्लाह गफूर रहीम सबकी मग़फ़िरत फरमा, सबको जन्नतुल फिरदौस में आला से आला मक़ाम अता फरमा। या अल्लाह गफूर रहीम इन्नल्लाह अला कुल्ली शैइन कदीर। प्यारे नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की सिफारिश नसीब फरमा, नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के नूरानी चेहरा की ज़ियारत नसीब फरमा, जन्नतुल फिरदौस में आला मकाम अता फरमा, सबको गुनाहों से माफ़ फरमा, सब की खताओं को माफ़ फरमा। हश्र के दिन हश्र के मैदान में ईमान के साथ उठा, ईमान वालों की जमात में उठा, आमाल नामा सीधा हाथ में नसीब फरमा। या अल्लाह जन्नतुल फिरदौस में आला मकाम अता फरमा। या अल्लाह मुसलमान जो परेशान है उनकी परेशानी को दूर फरमा, बेरोजगारों को हलाल रोजी अता फरमा, बे औलादों को नेक औलाद नसीब फरमा। या अल्लाह मुसलमान जो बीमार है या अल्लाह सबको बीमारी से शिफा फरमा। या अल्लाह कुल्ली शिफा अता फरमा, सबकी जान की, माल की, ईमान की, आबरू की, सेहत की हिफाजत फरमा। या अल्लाह तमाम की शिफा फरमा। जितने भी मुसलमान कोरोना बीमारी से या अल्लाह मुब्तला है या अल्लाह सबको शिफा फरमा, सबको जल्द से जल्द शिफा अता फरमा। या अल्लाह सबको सेहत अता फरमा। या अल्लाह या गफूर रहीम तमाम मुसलमानों के हक में दुआ करते हैं, सबको गुनाहों से माफ़ फरमा, सबको जन्नत नसीब फरमा, सबकी मग़फ़िरत फरमा। या अल्लाह सबकी जान की, माल की, ईमान की, आबरू की हिफाजत फरमा। या अल्लाह हमें गुनाहों से माफ़ फरमा। या अल्लाह हमें नेक बनाने की हिदायत, नेक तौफ़ीक़ अता फरमा। तुम्हें और तुम्हारी महबूब को राज़ी रखने की तौफ़ीक़ अता फरमा। या अल्लाह तुम्हारे हबीब सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के नक्श कदम पर चलने की तौफ़ीक़ अता फरमा, इस्लाम पर अमल करने की तौफ़ीक़ अता फरमा। या अल्लाह खातिमा बिल खैर हम सबके ईमान के साथ फरमा। या अल्लाह वक्त आखिर कलिमा ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह मुहम्मदुर रसूलुल्लाह नसीब फरमा। व सल्लल्लाहु तआला अला खैरि खल्क़िही व नूरि अर्शिही व ज़ीनति फर्शिही व कासिमि रिज़्क़िही व मज़हरि लुत्फ़िही मुहम्मद व अला आलिहि व अस्हाबिहि अजमईन। अल्लाहुम्मा अफ़्तह लना बिल खैर वख्तिम लना बिल खैर वजअल आवाक़िब उमूरिना बिल खैर बियदिकिल खैर इन्नका अला कुल्लि शैइन क़दीर। रब्बना तक़ब्बल मिन्ना इन्नका अंतस समीउल अलीम व तुब अलैना इन्नका अंतत तव्वाबुर रहीम। बिफ़द्लि सुब्हान रब्बिका रब्बिल इज़्ज़ति अम्मा यसिफ़ून व सलामुन अलल मुरसलीन वल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन बिरहमतिका या अरहमर राहिमीन।
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. Basically, for those of you who didn't understand that, it was just a prayer to ask us all that God forgive us, guide us on the straight path, and maybe follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in doing righteous deeds. We've also prayed for those who have passed on with the COVID, and may they get the highest place in the gardens of paradise. And we've also prayed for those who are sick. Have I forgotten anything else?
Forgiveness of those who are lost.
And we've asked for forgiveness. I thank you all once again, and I bid you farewell. Assalamu alaikum. And don't forget to fill the survey. This will help us to plan future programs. Jazakallah. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Famida. Thank you, Bilal. Thanks, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.